In the outskirts of a mysterious labyrinth city called Merhak, in a clinic called Iris Hospital, Sato Shiki, a simple healer, one day unexpectedly found himself in another world, continuing to do his usual thing, treating patients. On that fateful day, a girl came to the clinic with unexpected news. Sato was now fired and should not appear in this place anymore. Despite the order, he could not obey and stayed. A few minutes before, he had finished treating the girl using poison extraction magic. After the procedure, he calmly announced that the treatment was finished and set the price 400 zeni. After hearing the price, the patient was a little confused and tried to persuade him to lower the price. She complained that her equipment had become unusable after her last trip to the labyrinth, and her finances were tight. However, Sato explained that he could not make an exception. Another unauthorized discount would lead to dismissal. He found himself in a difficult situation because he worked here only as a hired healer, and the girl was a frequent visitor, an adventurer who regularly treated wounds after trips. She promised with a grin that Igris wouldn't know that she had asked for a discount and insisted that he only charge for the poison extraction procedure. Sato felt a strong sense of embarrassment and internal conflict. The rules strictly forbade such a thing. The girl continued to press him, assuring him that he could even touch her if it made it easier to make a decision. The guy extended his hands in refusal and tried to justify himself by mentioning that the clinic was currently experiencing financial difficulties and any violation could cost him his job. He finally gave in and reduced the price to 200 zeni. The girl immediately became happy and thanked him. It was a common practice for her. She often got a discount using the same method of seduction. At that moment, Ekris entered the office. She sternly asked what was going on here. Her face was serious, and the room became awkward. Sato and the girl felt caught off guard. The patient quickly thanked him for the treatment and hurried to the exit, and Sato mentally noted that this was exactly the kind of behavior to expect from the adventurer. Ekris reminded him that she had repeatedly forbidden giving discounts without permission. Sato was confused and tried to get out of the situation with humor, remembering the rule: if you get into trouble, just smile. Ekris, however, asked a direct question. Why did he touch the girl? In response, he tried to justify himself by saying that the injury was in the chest area and healing required touching. This was an attempt to apply the second rule: come up with a plausible reason. But Iris immediately clarified, if magic was used, why touch with hands? She admitted that she had been watching them from the very beginning. Then Sato resorted to the third rule: if everything is bad, fall on your knees and beg for forgiveness. He did so, asking for mercy. The girl just chuckled. She remembered how she hired him. The guy assured her that he wanted to work here at all costs, and Sato realized that at that moment he spoke sincerely. Even though he chose this place solely because of Iris's figure. However, Iris continued. She tolerated his discounts and flirting only because his magic was amazingly effective. But now, that was over. Without further ado, she declared him fired and ordered him not to come to the hospital again. So Sato found himself homeless and unemployed in an unfamiliar world. He realized the horror of the situation. It was practically impossible to find a new clinic willing to hire a healer without a church diploma, and only now did he understand how magnanimous Ekris had been. After all, when she kicked him out, she had packed his things in advance, and had done so not out of emotion, but after making a final decision. Sato clearly remembered the awkward incident in the bathroom yesterday, when he had accidentally bumped into Iris, slipped, and instinctively grabbed her breast. The memory of that was too vivid to be depressed right now. Realizing that he was in another world, Sakito decided that it was high time to build himself a harem. However, his thoughts were interrupted when someone unexpectedly approached him. It was the same girl he had treated not long ago. She asked in surprise why he was drinking in broad daylight. Sato explained that he had been fired from the hospital, and in response she chuckled and apologized. Looking away, the girl clearly understood the reason for what had happened. Sato asked her to remind him of her name, which caused her genuine surprise. She noted with annoyance that after all those hints and concessions for the sake of a discount, he did not even remember her name. Sato hastened to justify himself that they had only communicated about the treatment, and therefore had not had time to get to know each other properly. However, he himself understood there had been more than enough flirting on her part. The girl introduced herself as Ruruka and asked him to finally remember it. Sato, with a forced smile, promised not to forget, realizing that it was this treacherous seductress who was partly to blame for his dismissal. He thought that he had given her a discount, but he had never received payment, Although he could not say this out loud, an awkward silence hung between them, and Sato only sighed heavily. Ruka sat down next to him, noting that his sigh was unusually heavy. Sato admitted that he was seriously upset about losing his job, and he had no idea how to live on now. Then the girl asked an unexpected question. She asked him if he wanted to become an adventurer. Sato hesitated, explaining that his specialty was only healing magic. Ruka agreed that it would be difficult for him to do it alone, but hinted that if he formed his own party, then there was a chance. Sato immediately offered to join her team. However, he quickly realized that this was impossible. Ruka chuckled and reminded him that there was already one timid girl in her squad. Sato remembered that they had already discussed this. Her team was all female. And although he really wanted to join, he knew that was out of the question. He knew that if he were in Ruruka's place, he would never allow himself to join. His reputation was too dubious. Besides, there was a risk that he would start looking into the bathroom again. He asked if it was difficult for newcomers to find comrades, since he had no friends or connections. When they brought her food, the girl was happy, and he asked if she was listening to him. Ruruka nodded and added that his magic was really outstanding, so she was sure he could do it. He just needed to try a little. But Sato was still at a loss, not knowing what to do now. As Sato wandered aimlessly through the streets, he suddenly remembered the day he had been attacked with a knife, a day that had also begun with an uneasy feeling of uncertainty. He couldn't believe that all this wasn't a dream, as if he was in a game or even in the afterlife. Not understanding what was happening, he continued to wander around the city without a goal. He remembered the mixture of despair and joy when Ugris unexpectedly hired him, and although he eventually angered her and was kicked out, the memory
I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel, liked and wrote a comment, rating this manga on a scale from 1 to 10. Your opinion is very important to me. This will help me better understand what my audience is interested in, because you are really important to me.
memories of the beginning remained bright. Wandering through the narrow streets, he noticed a small crowd and became interested in what was happening. It turned out to be a slave market. In this world, a person could end up in slavery for many reasons, but the rules for dealing with them were clear. The owner was obliged to provide the minimum for life, and the slave was obliged to follow orders without question. If the slave refused to obey, a magical seal came into play, the seal of enslavement, which forced him to obey the will of the master. Sato wondered, is it possible to take slaves with you into the labyrinth? He came to the conclusion that, with such a seal, betrayal on the campaign was excluded. The idea of reliable companions seemed tempting, but having counted the money, he realized he only had 60,000 zenies, and even the cheapest slave costs about 200,000. Deciding that going into debt to buy a dubious idea wasn't the best plan, he was about to leave. But then his gaze caught on the unusually low price. One copy caught his attention. It was a girl, a dark elf, covered in bruises and wounds. It looked like she had recently been attacked by a monster. She looked miserable, and Sato realized that she wouldn't last long. The price, only 50,000 zeni, only confirmed her critical condition. He realized that he was neither a Lolita nor a philanthropist, but the amount was fine with him, and if he wanted to form a squad with her, he needed to find out what she was capable of. With these thoughts, he activated his appraisal skill. The girl's name was Uwell, and her only combat talent was her skill with a dagger. Despite her young age, Sato realized that with such skill, she could very well become an adventurer. He made his final decision. Approaching the seller, Sato said that he wanted to buy a dark elf. The old man asked doubtfully whether he understood that the girl was blind and that the treatment would cost a pretty penny. However, Satito calmly replied that he did not care and asked to complete the deal. The seller took the payment, promised to prepare a contract of enslavement, and warned that he would not accept returns. As Uwell approached, Sato gently raised his hand and directed it toward the girl's shoulder. The light of healing magic enveloped her body, and the seal of submission was established. She modestly introduced herself, and he, smiling in response, said his name, Shiki. Having given the girl his hand, he made sure that she really could not see anything. Without thinking, he suggested that they first go to the hotel so that she could rest. As they walked, he realized with every step that a young, wounded girl covered in bandages was walking next to him. As he approached the hotel, he held her hand, not letting her get lost. The building was one of those where each room had a bathroom. The establishment was considered expensive. Sato tried not to pay attention to the charming reception girls, because their visit here was strictly practical. Once in the room, he asked if she was tired from the walk and wanted to lie down. Uwell politely agreed, nodding a little shyly. She bowed low, thanking him for buying her. She admitted that she was still inexperienced, but promised to try sincerely. Her voice sounded with genuine excitement. Sato asked her to be quiet. A feeling of guilt and internal resistance flared up inside him. He understood that he was dealing with a child, and his thoughts about past affairs were unacceptable. He forced himself to return to the bounds of decency. Driving away shameful thoughts, he suggested starting with treatment. Uwell was surprised by this approach, not expecting that the owner would want to immediately take care of her health. Concentrating, Sato activated divine healing. The bandages covering the girl's body began to disappear one by one, along with the deep wounds. The last layer of cloth fell to the floor. Uwell froze in surprise. Sato announced that the treatment was over and, holding out a mirror, gave her the opportunity to see her reflection for the first time. Her vision was completely restored. The girl gently touched her eyes and then burst into tears. Her tears were filled with relief and joy that was difficult to convey in words. She couldn't believe she could see again. She was surprised to see that she had ears that she hadn't noticed before. Sato watched her reaction with satisfaction. Uwell asked excitedly if he was really her master now. The guy grinned and asked her if she found him attractive. Uwell jumped up with delight and jumped into his arms. With shining eyes, she admitted that he was the coolest of all the people she knew. Sato was amazed by such an admission. The girl thanked him for the treatment and said that she wanted to thank him for real. She offered to serve to the best of her ability, but Sato immediately replied that he had not bought her for pleasure. He was quite serious. He explained that he had bought it so that they could go into the labyrinth together. He needed to gather a party, since he was serious about becoming an adventurer. Uwell sheepishly asked how she could help if she only had the dagger skill. Sato assured her that everything was fine. Moreover, he promised that she would be able to eat whatever she wanted for the next 2 days, and until she was able to fight, he would support her with healing magic. He believed that together they would form a strong team. Uwell thought about it, and she firmly said that she would take responsibility for all battles. She promised to protect her master even at the cost of her own life. Sato approved, and said that tomorrow they would go to the labyrinth. He suggested establishing teamwork. The girl was delighted and said that she was looking forward to it. He asked again if the prospect of going into the labyrinth scared her. So Sato became a healer adventurer in an alien world, where his new destiny began. The labyrinth was a dangerous place, filled with magical creatures, but also held the potential for quick riches. Uwell happily declared that exploring the labyrinth was fun. To her, it was like going to an amusement park, although in reality she was still a child. Despite this, Sato had led her into the heart of danger, and now he felt guilty. He did not understand where the girl got so much joy from, whether from self-confidence or from naive self-confidence. Meanwhile, Uwell confidently dealt with the monsters in the dungeon, which caused sincere surprise in her master. Turning to him, she asked with a mischievous smile what he thought of her success. Sato noticed how she was waiting for praise, like a puppy waiting for affection. He put his hand on her head, stroked it, and said that she was amazing. Uwell beamed with happiness. Her strength was clearly beyond expectations. She destroyed the monsters of the first levels without any difficulty, and on the third level, she even intimidated everyone who came her way. Her skill was beyond doubt. Sato admitted that he could only watch her combat exploits and praise her from time to time. She did it so well that she didn't even get injured. All his usefulness was limited to the ability to heal, but Uwell did not need healing yet. He regretted it, because next to her he felt superfluous. Mentally, he apologized to her for being just an observer. He again admitted that she was magnificent. The girl laughed, genuinely pleased with the praise. After successful battles, they went to the tavern. There they counted the profit, about 2,000 zeni, earned entirely by Uwell's efforts. Sato felt like a gigolo. Uwell, enjoying the food, cheerfully said that everything was very tasty, and he reminded her that it was all her merit. The girl's face was beaming with a carefree smile. Sato remembered Igris once wondering if food really tasted better when paid for with someone else's money. Suddenly, he was called. It was Rushika, who ran up and happily said that she had been looking for him for a long time. She said that he was the only one who could be relied on. Uwell asked in surprise who the girl was. Ruruka asked if the girl was really his slave, and seeing how small she was, joked that it was clear. Shiki was attracted to small ones. She even offered to borrow her for a while. Sato quickly refuted her words. He explained to Uwell that the girl's name was Ruruka and that he had treated her at the hospital where he worked before. She was also an adventurer. The girl greeted her politely, and Sato added that he had bought Uwell at the slave market yesterday. She was also glad to meet him. Ruka asked with interest if they really went to the labyrinth together. Sato confirmed and proudly noted that the girl was an excellent fighter, easily dealing with monsters, and Gol received many compliments. Ruruka admitted that she was looking for such a member for the squad, and asked if the girl would join her if she got bored with the owner. Sato immediately asked her not to lure Uwell away. Uwell confidently declared that she would never stop loving her master. After all, he not only bought her, but also cured her, which means he will never betray her. She, in turn, will also stay with him forever. The girl blushed slightly. Ruruka apologized and promised not to upset her. Then, lowering her voice, she asked Sato what kind of wound the girl was talking about, since there was not a single scratch on Uwell's body. The guy answered with a satisfied smile that it was all thanks to his healing magic. Fair. Reminiscing about the past, Ruruka called her squadmates to introduce them to Shikaki. She introduced Fran and Sarira, her comrades. The girls noted that Ruruka always takes care of them. Fran, however, did not seem interested. Sato tried to shake hands, but was ignored. He didn't understand who he was dealing with. Ruruka explained that Fran wanted him to heal her shoulder. The monster had left a bite. She handed him a bag of money and said that scars didn't suit girls. Sato objected that scars were normal for adventurers and didn't harm their health, but he knew that he couldn't refuse. Ruruka was persistent and had already paid for everything. Hei used healing magic. Fran looked at her shoulder without much expression. Sato asked if she wouldn't even thank him. She coldly replied that she didn't ask for it. He felt stupid in front of Uwell and hoped that she didn't notice. However, he also understood that if the girl saw how he reacted in anger, she might get scared. So he calmly asked Ruruka if Fran really didn't like men that much. She nodded and said yes, and as she left, she added that they would still count on him to help with injuries. Sato realized that he no longer counted on Fran's treatment. In the morning, Uwell wanted to turn to Sato, but he gently reassured her, saying that everything was fine between them. The girl nodded and did not continue. The next day arrived. In his dream, Sato saw an army of giant drills that looked like someone from the past. He woke up, turned around, and said good morning to Uwell. The girl responded in kind. They still slept in the same bed, and although it might seem strange to others, Sato himself did not feel embarrassed and had no intention of changing his habit. He justified it by saying that Uwell was his slave, and he was just using her as a living hot water bottle and carrying her in his arms against her will. Besides, they slept on a soft futon, and he didn't have any dirty thoughts. At that moment, the girl quietly called him. She closed her eyes, and the guy didn't immediately understand what she was trying to achieve. The idea that she wanted a morning kiss seemed impossible to him. Seeing the girl stretch her lips, he thought. Although her intentions were obvious, he decided that if he were to kiss, then on the cheek, it was almost like on the lips. He turned to her, trying to understand her intentions. Sato noticed that the shy girl suddenly showed courage. However, he knew that if he ignored it, he might hurt her. He didn't know what to do. His hesitation only added to the confusion. Tears began to appear in Uwell's eyes. Then Sato decided to pet her, hoping to calm her down. However, the girl wanted something else. She tried to say so, but he stopped her. The guy gently reminded her that she was still too young for such things and switched his attention to business. Today they had to eat a lot, work a little, and get a good night's sleep. Sato decided that the girl had probably taken yesterday's situation too seriously and was trying to comfort him, as slaves did. He admitted to himself that if she were older, he might have taken advantage of it. Uwell suddenly asked if she really didn't make him aroused. The guy calmly explained that now she is still a child, but in a few years she will probably become seductive. Uwell thought about it and promised to try. Realizing that he had avoided an awkward situation, Sato decided to continue being a good owner, even though he knew that Uwell was trying to please him and was not giving up. He never lost hope of creating a harem someday. Smiling, he asked the girl if she wanted to have breakfast before going to the labyrinth. Uwell happily agreed. After eating, they went on another mission. Sato had no weapon, so the fight was entirely on the girl's shoulders. Or rather, he simply tried not to interfere. To avoid being hit, he stayed close to her, holding a sandwich and a basket of provisions. After destroying all the monsters, Uwell reported her victory. Sato praised her and offered her a snack. The girl took a bite with pleasure. Sato noticed how she reminded him of a puppy. Suddenly she grabbed his hand, and he asked in bewilderment what she was doing. Without answering, Uwell began to lick his fingers, explaining that she did not want to lose the taste of spices. The guy was shocked. He urgently needed to get rid of indecent thoughts. At that moment, the girl became alert. Someone was approaching. Strangers were heading their way, calling for help. Sato and Uwell hurried to them. One of the men reported that his friend's leg had been bitten off by a giant ant and begged for something to stop the bleeding. Sato assured him that he would fix everything, and, preparing for the treatment, remembered that such ants inhabited the next levels of the labyrinth. He used divine healing. The injured man's leg was instantly restored. The companions were amazed, not believing that he appeared out of nowhere and healed such a serious injury. However, Sato hinted that he would not mind receiving gratitude. Uwell admiringly said that he was, as always, magnificent. At first, the boy felt dissatisfied with what was happening. But then he remembered that Uwell was his slave and should respect him. Meanwhile, the wounded man rose to his feet and declared that he was obliged to thank her for saving him. However, Sakito stopped the man with a wave of his hand and refused the payment. For him, the value of a life saved was greater than any money. He turned to Uwell and said that it was time for them to move on. He had a pleasant feeling inside. He really did feel like a hero now. But a sudden noise behind him made him feel confused. Those he had just saved came up and asked in surprise if he really didn't want a reward. They were amazed at his skill and didn't believe that he was an ordinary monk. Sato didn't understand what they were trying to achieve, but he felt it was best to see them off. He offered to accompany them to the exit of the labyrinth. Already in the tavern, as expected, there was no benefit from this, only pleasant conversation. They started drinking beer in the establishment. During the conversation, Sato realized that these were really good guys. Their names were Ido and Gads. Sato admitted that it wasn't quite right for them to party at someone else's expense. But Ido brushed it off, reminding them that he had helped him. And that was enough. Gads asked why Sato, who had healing magic, was not working at the clinic. The boy explained that he did not want to return to such work, and revealed that he was not a monk at all. He asked to keep the information about his true gift a secret. Ido suggested that perhaps he was in trouble. Then he suggested that Sato start a private healing practice. It would even be possible to work right in the bar. Gads supported the idea, offering to reserve a separate table for him. Sato thought it was worth trying. Ido immediately suggested talking to the owner of the establishment. If such a service attracts customers, perhaps he would even be allowed to use 2 tables. Sato agreed. He had nothing to lose. The bar owner, having learned that a healer would be working in the establishment, was pleasantly surprised, and without further questions, allocated a table. Sato himself did not expect that everything would turn out so easily. Until recently, he was unemployed, and essentially just living at the expense of others. But now, everything was starting to come together. He could even afford to buy a simple weapon for self-defense. Everything went like clockwork. Almost. Except for one awkward moment. These were night incidents. Sato recalled an unpleasant incident when Uwell could notice his physiological arousal in the morning. The girl reached out to him in bewilderment and asked him curiously what it was. He quickly brushed it off, writing it off as his body's peculiarities. Thinking about it, Sato realized that Uwell had been by his side since the purchase, and that may have been the cause of the incident. He realized that he urgently needed to do something about his libido. Later, in the tavern, he shared this with the guys. Gads joked that maybe it wasn't that bad, but Ido warned him that if Uwell suspected him of inappropriate behavior, he might well refuse the contract. Gads agreed, as such a misunderstanding could ruin their relationship. As they reasoned, Sato felt like the two were really beginning to understand him. Ido was insightful, and Gads was simple-minded but kind. The guy also admitted that there was another problem. He and Uwell were always together. The guys teased him, hinting at falling in love. Then Ido suggested a simple solution. He mentioned a local product, slime maker, which is often used in the kitchen. Sato was surprised that such a thing could be useful in his situation, and immediately asked where he could get this product. Ido explained that a slimer cannot be bought for money. It only drops from special slimes that live on the 7th level of the labyrinth. When Sato returned to Uwell, she greeted him happily, and, hearing his stomach growl, asked him with concern if everything was okay. He assured her that there was nothing to worry about. He noted internally that he had just discussed a delicate topic with Ido and Gads in the toilet, and together they had found a solution to the problem that had arisen. Sato announced that it was time to head into the labyrinth again. Uwell happily agreed, and his target was now the slime from the 7th levels. However, before he had even gone halfway, Sakito became exhausted and collapsed. He realized with annoyance that even one slug was difficult to obtain. Remembering the slimy liquid left by the monsters, he realized that he had slipped on it and lost consciousness. He felt uneasy at the thought that Uwell might see him in this state. But instead of mocking him, the girl ran up to him and apologized for not being able to protect him. Sato assured her that it was no problem, because he had just hit his head hard, and she had saved him more than once. Uwell looked upset, and Sato felt that he seemed weak and helpless to her again. He tried to console the girl, asking her not to cry. She admitted that no one but him stroked her. Sato noticed that her ears had drooped. For the first time, they were showing emotion. He wanted to see her carefree smile again. He scratched her ears and added that he wanted to see her happy. Uwell laughed, and Sato felt relieved. He guessed that the girl had probably been a slave since childhood and had not known warmth and care, so he decided to continue to comfort her. Affection was like medicine for her. Despite her outstanding fighting skills, he needed to be there to maintain her inner balance. In addition, he himself became attached to her, and now saw his role not only as a healer, but also as a person who gives her peace. He told her that they would always be together. The girl was sincerely happy with these words. Her joy was genuine. Uwell promised that next time she would definitely protect him. Sato believed in her, and, having restored her confidence, suggested that they postpone further exploration of the labyrinth until the next day. The girl readily agreed. But for him, this did not mean abandoning his goal at all. Tomorrow, he would definitely get the slimer. In the evening, Ruruka approached Sato, unexpectedly offering to go to the labyrinth together tomorrow. The guy was surprised and asked the reason for such a decision. Ruruka admitted that she doesn't like to explore the labyrinth alone, and her friends Fran and Sanera are resting today. She also hoped that Uwell would be with them. The girl answered with a smile that she likes Ruruka too. Sato mentioned that they had just been to the 7th floor today and hunted slimes. If Ruruka agreed, they could go together. Ruruka was surprised when he told her they were hunting slimes. Sato explained that he had heard that the items they dropped were in high demand. She doubted his words, but smiled. She thought for a moment and agreed to meet the next day. However, she suddenly suggested that they spend the night together at a hotel. Sato was stunned by this idea and could not believe that they would sleep in the same room. Later, he realized that it was only about accommodation in the same hotel, not in the same room. Ruruka said goodbye and closed the door behind her. He came to the conclusion that the girl was just teasing him. Meanwhile, Uwell called the owner to bed. Sato agreed and decided that since things didn't work out with Ruruka, he would spend the evening with Uwell. When their room door closed, Ruruka suddenly opened hers, noticing how much Shishaki blushed. Opening their door slightly, she was surprised to hear strange sounds. Uwell was anxiously asking if she was doing it right, and Sato, relaxing, confirmed it. The girl blushed, tired, but tried. Ruruka was confused. Uwell, despite being tired, said that she would try for her master. Suddenly, Ruruka burst into the room, demanding that everything stop immediately. She wanted to blame Sato, but she didn't have time. Uwell asked in surprise what was going on, and Sato why she came here. He calmly explained that Uwell was just helping him stretch his shoulders, and repeated the question about the purpose of her visit. Ruruka was completely embarrassed and blushed. She hesitantly said that she hadn't come for anything, slammed the door, and disappeared. Sato was pleased, because now Ruruka was in an awkward position. Uwell asked if they should continue, and he asked her not to stop. He sighed, but wondered if they should sleep in the same bed. The next day, Ruruka approached Sato and asked if something had happened between him and Uwell. He calmly continued to pet the girl, answering evasively. Ruruka changed the subject to the reward for killing monsters. She asked if he was ready to accept her. Sato tensed up inside, suspecting another provocation. Uwell watched in bewilderment, and he only assumed that perhaps they were talking about something unsaid. He thought that Ruka also wanted him to pet her. The girl was confused and blushed, meeting his gaze. Then she abruptly changed the subject, suggesting that they move to the 7th level. Sato noticed that she had touched him several times, and although he doubted that she was in love, he began to see signs of sympathy in her behavior. He tried to push these thoughts away, convincing himself that Ruruka was just playing with him. Meanwhile, their team was successfully defeating the slimes, and Ruruka and Uwell demonstrated excellent coordination in battle. Meanwhile, Sato was diligently extracting the slime from the bodies of the defeated monsters, preparing to use it for its intended purpose. They got many copies of the slime salter. Uwell, touching the slime, noted its elasticity and, laughing, offered to improve the mood of the owner. Sato was pleased, because the goal was finally achieved. Sase Ruruka suggested going and selling the loot. Sato was upset, because he had not thought about himself beforehand. He regretted telling about the value of the slime salter. Ruka added that they are used in cooking, which surprised the guy. Realizing that he might be left with nothing, he decided to come up with a way to keep at least one copy for himself. The guy suddenly jumped and caught one of the slimes that had slipped out of the girl's hands. He was overwhelmed with joy. Finally, he had the prey. The others just stared at him in confusion, not understanding the reason for such an action. Sato realized that it was time to quickly run away before the girls started demanding an explanation or tried to take the slug away from him. But during his escape, he bumped into someone. As he was about to apologize, he suddenly felt a pleasant warmth in his palms. Opening his eyes, he was surprised to find Alice standing in front of him. The girl, no less surprised, recognized him as Shiki. The moment was awkward. He accidentally hugged her again, which only made the situation worse. He tried to apologize, but to no avail. Alice slapped him. Sato asked if she should be at the clinic, not near the bar, and what happened. But the girl, with a cold expression, turned away and left, saying that it was none of his business. At that moment, Ruka came up to him and reminded him that if he continued to be late like this, they would leave him alone. He hurried after them. He glanced anxiously at Alice as he passed. Ruruka noted that it was time for her to leave soon. Sato thanked her for her help, and Uwell expressed her appreciation for her efforts. Ruruka suggested that they repeat their adventure together sometime, and the guy agreed, surprising Uwell. The group laughed, said goodbye, and went their separate ways. However, Uwell didn't look happy. She quietly walked up to Sato and took his hand. He asked what was wrong, but the girl only shook her head. Later, they went to a tavern, where they met Ido and Gads. Ido noted that Sato was not bad, since he had already reached the 7th level. He modestly replied that this was due to Uwell. Gads added that it was precisely because the guy was covering her from behind that the girl was able to give it her all in battle. He asked Uwell if she agreed with this. The girl confirmed it and added that he was right. Then she asked what the reason for the celebration was. Sato explained that they were celebrating the victory over the slugs. The girl was surprised why exactly over them. Ido reproachfully reminded Sato that they had agreed not to mention it. The boy did not immediately understand, but then remembered the agreement. All this was done in order to preserve his image as a noble master in the eyes of Uwell. Moreover, given the girl's character, the truth could have unpredictable consequences. He realized that he had acted wisely. Meanwhile, Sato's attention was distracted. There were too many beautiful waitresses around, and he no longer knew where to look. His gaze slid over them, while Uwell watched him with bewilderment, and then turned her attention to the girls themselves. She wondered if a similar outfit with fluttering skirts would suit her. Sato said that she would look charming, and admitted that he would like to see her like that. The girl became embarrassed. Ido agreed, and suggested rewarding Uwell. Gads agreed, noting that the moment was right. After all, she clearly liked the skirt. The girl hesitantly replied that she did not know if such an outfit would suit her. Sato insisted, considering it gratitude for her efforts. He added that she should believe in herself. The girl perked up at his words. She promised to make an effort, and the guy, looking at her with a red face, confirmed that she was doing well. However, he suddenly felt weak and lost consciousness. Uwell was confused, not understanding what had happened to the owner. Ido and Gads explained that he had simply fallen asleep. The next day, Sato admitted that he had drunk too much and that his wallet was now empty. Even though he had promised to buy Uwell a skirt, the boy's thoughts kept returning to money. He knew that up until the 7th floor, the most valuable trophy belonged to one particular monster. It was the boss of the 7th level, the King of Slimes, a giant clot of gelatinous mass. A rare and especially valuable trophy from him was considered to be the Crown of Slimes, which was eagerly bought by collectors, and the price for it could reach 200,000 zeni, which seemed like a tempting prospect. Suddenly, Uwell called the owner, saying that she had dealt with all the slimes she had encountered. Sato knew that the small opponents were no threat to her, but the size of the huge slime was many times larger than the usual monsters, and this was alarming. He understood that the impact of the massive body could crush the girl, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Meanwhile, they approached the hall where the boss lived. Uwell assured that she was ready to enter there at any moment for him. To her, it was just a big slug. But Sato decided that fighting together would be too risky and suggested abandoning the idea. The girl submitted to his decision. Later, sitting at his table in the tavern, he admitted that it would have been a quick way to make money. He continued to work as a healer, but the income from the summons was too modest to save up for a gift for Uwell. Soon the girl came up and said that she would go away for a while to fix her hair. Sato just nodded and let her go. Uwell hurried, and Ruruka appeared from behind the curtain, asking if he was free. The girl said that she was injured and asked if he could heal her. The guy chuckled and noted that he would be glad if she paid for the treatment. Ruka just laughed and offered to discuss the price after the examination. Taking off her cloak, she showed a small wound. Sato reminded him that the cost did not depend on the size of the damage, but on the spell he used. The girl called it cold, but he knew that it was just part of their peculiar negotiation game. He wondered internally what Ruka really felt for him. He remembered the moment in the labyrinth when they stood opposite each other and couldn't believe that it was just a joke. Deciding to use the game as a cover, he intended to go as far as possible, a kind of payback for the fact that she had thwarted his plans last time. Ruruka mentioned again that the wound was tiny and suggested that he take a closer look. He replied that he couldn't see it clearly enough. In fact, he noticed that there was no sign of damage on the girl's chest. It became clear that she was simply looking for an excuse to see him. Ruruka pretended to be surprised and admitted that nothing could be done about it. She went to the curtain, looked around, closed it, and returned. Taking his hand, she was about to continue. But at that moment, Uwell returned. The girl, seeing them together, froze in shock. Sato realized that he had gotten carried away and called himself an idiot. He remembered that he had completely forgotten about Uwell's presence and knew that he had to say something urgently or he would lose her trust. There was only one goal spinning in his thoughts: not to let the girl doubt him. Taking a deep breath, he stated that he was performing a complex treatment that required touching. He hoped that Ruruka would understand and support his version, mentally begging her to play into his hands. The girl, as if in agreement, squeezed his hand and confirmed his words. She placed his hand on her chest and asked if it was okay, causing Sato to blush and Uwell to become more and more surprised. The girl stuttered, trying to say something, but he interrupted her. However, Ruruka did not stop and exclaimed that her master had been stolen. Uwell burst into tears, unable to contain her emotions. Shiki and Ruruka felt awkward. The boy turned to the girl, and the girl quickly apologized, admitting that she did not mean to make her cry. Uwell gradually calmed down, and Ruruka asked to believe her sincere apology. She clarified that she did not try to take Shikaki away, but only briefly occupied him for a procedure called palpation, which is a genuine medical technique. Hearing the unfamiliar word, the girl looked up in surprise, and there were still tears in her eyes. The guy explained that it was a complex treatment that allowed him to check for hidden abnormalities in the body. When she asked him if these words were true, he apologized internally for another lie, but he understood that he was forced to deceive in order to soften the situation. Sato suggested looking at Ruruka's chest to confirm the results. He showed that there was not even a scratch left on the skin, and this was due to his magic. The girl confirmed what he said, admiring his skill. Uwell said she was glad, and then threw herself into his arms. There was an awkward pause, and both Ruruka and Sato were surprised that they were able to convince the girl. The guy noted that Ruruka did not have to pay, since they were already leaving, to which she thanked them. That night, Uwell sat on the bed, remaining silent the entire time, which did not escape his attention. He wondered if she realized it was a lie, but the girl suddenly said that she was in pain. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about, and she clarified that her body was still aching. Sato frowned and cast a high healing spell. However, She said that it didn't help, because ever since she saw him with Ruruka, her chest felt like it was being squeezed by a vice. Then he realized that it was about feelings that were not subject to magic. It was jealousy and anxiety. And in the meantime, Uwell said that she had a special request. She asked if he could perform the palpation on her as well. The girl repeated the request, clearly expecting consent. Sato was stunned. He wondered if it was worth doing, since in her case it was more about a wound in the soul that such a procedure would not heal. He knew that a refusal right now could ruin her self-confidence forever. So he agreed, came closer, and extended his hand to her, reminding her of his previous words, gently stroking her. At the same time, he clearly knew that no matter how much he lost his temper with Alice or Ruka, there was a line he wouldn't cross with a child like Uwell. He just wanted to make her smile again. He realized that anxiety had pushed her to this request, and his priority should be to reassure her. He repeated that they would always be together, and the girl looked at him carefully. She asked him if he would give her something for her hard work, promising to work even harder. When the time came, she would like to receive the reward again. The guy was surprised, but agreed. Uwell said that, in that case, she was fine, said goodnight to her master, and went to sleep next to him. Sato lay awake for a long time, wondering if he would be able to sleep at all after the decision he had made that evening regarding Uwell. Suddenly, he noticed that the girl was not there. He got up and rushed out into the street, searched the hotel, but did not find her anywhere, and when he ran out, he did not understand where she could have gone. Stopping a passerby, he asked about a dark elf of her height. The man replied that about 10 minutes ago he saw her heading towards the labyrinth. The guy realized that was where she was going. The idea that Uwell would go into the labyrinth in the middle of the night with the intention of fighting the boss alone seemed crazy to him. Once inside, he began to fight his way through the monsters, barely managing to deal with them. Realizing that he couldn't defeat even a weak enemy on his own, he walked around them, using healing to keep going. He was sure that he had time to stop Uwell, but suddenly he fell, not understanding what happened. Looking down, he saw with horror that he had lost his leg, and a little further away he noticed a giant ant. Realizing that it was approaching, he hastily tried to restore the limb with a healing spell, using a trembling hand. The faces of Alice, who still hated him, and Ruruka, whose feelings he had never figured out, flashed through his mind. But what held him back most was the thought that he had no right to die, leaving Uwell alone. The ant was already close. Having applied the highest healing, he closed his eyes, but heard a sharp sound, and opening his eyes, he was surprised. Ants. In front of him stood two familiar faces, Ido and Gadad's. The ant had been decapitated, and his friends asked why he was alone. Sato explained that he had woken up and discovered that Uwell had disappeared, and assumed that she had gone to fight the boss. Gads was surprised, and said that the girl was not in the labyrinth at all, but in a bar. The guy didn't understand what was being said and asked again, to which Gads repeated what he had said. He explained that Uwell had talked about wanting to work as a waitress and, in order not to inconvenience the owner, decided to work while he was resting. Sato didn't remember these words, and Ido assumed that it was because he was drunk. Gads was surprised, and Sato himself smiled in confusion. Not fully understanding what was happening, he apologized to them. The friends waved him off, reminding him that they help each other in trouble, and added that alcohol always tastes better after a good deed. They advised him to tidy up his dirty clothes so as not to shock Uwell with his appearance, and he agreed. Returning to the hotel, he began to do the laundry, but realized that the bloodstains would not come out. After hiding the things, he noticed that Uwell entered the room, and the girl froze in surprise. She asked if he was injured. Sato replied that it was monster blood and that he was unharmed. After a short pause, Uwell said that Geyser had told her about his nighttime trek into the labyrinth to look for her. Sato was surprised that his friends had already had a drink, and Uwell, feeling guilty, tried to apologize, but he interrupted her, saying that he had misunderstood everything and now they were both fine, so there was no reason to worry. He only asked if she agreed with him. The girl asked if she could help him wash the blood off the body, but he refused, noting that her clothes would get dirty, and assured her that he could handle it himself. Then she suggested that they undress, which Sato took extremely undesirably. Uwell noticed that his back was all sticky with blood and thanked him for everything. She admitted that she was very scared when she learned about him going into the labyrinth alone, and that the sight of her master covered in blood hurt her. However, now there was relief shining in her eyes. She felt happy knowing how much he cared about her. Sakato thought that all his efforts had been in vain, but he admitted that perhaps it was better this way. Uwell asked him not to go into the labyrinth alone anymore, and he agreed. In the morning, he praised her for her good work, noting that she looked cute as always, which made her very happy. Several days passed. Worried about her workload, he learned that the tavern shifts had been moved to the evening, and the incident with the waitress's uniform was a thing of the past. Since then, dinners, accompanied by her stories about her work, had become a regular part of their day. One day at dinner, she started talking about the new waitress, mentioning that she was in a tough spot. She had to sell her house because of debt, and now she was working with them. Sato remarked that it must be very difficult for her. Uwell added that the girl's own business was collapsing, and she needed additional work in addition to the clinic. Sato felt that he had heard something like this before, and asked for the name. She replied that it was Alice. They soon met, and Uwell introduced Sato as her master. Alice, surprised by the meeting, noted that they had not seen each other for a long time, and he returned the greeting. Alice admitted that Uwell often praised him, and she became curious to know who this saint was. The girl asked if she knew her master, and Sato, clenching his fist, said that he knew about her current difficulties. He said he had heard that the clinic had been put up for auction a week ago, and offered to help, even though he knew it might look like a calculated move. It was important to him not only to smooth over her hostility, but also to repay her for her previous good deeds, and his desire to help was sincere. Alice replied that the debts were there before he arrived, and his habit of giving discounts and accidentally peeping in the bathroom only irritated her, but despite this, everything came to the current result. She said that she has a younger sister who studies in the capital and dreams of becoming a knight. To pay for her studies, Alice secretly borrowed money, since her sister had no one else. She emphasized that this was her personal problem, and she was not going to drag Sato into it. Sato said that the clinic was her home, and asked her to name the amount of the debt, promising to help. But Alice smiled and admitted that she had already made the decision to sell the clinic, and that everything was fine now. Having said this, she opened the door and went out. Sato wondered why, if she said she didn't regret it. She is crying. Uwell quietly explained that Alice had lost her parents in a long-ago accident, and perhaps that was why she had decided to sell the clinic, full of memories, in order to save the only person close to her sister. He knew that Alice couldn't help but regret selling the clinic, and he realized that he still knew too little about it. Turning around, he surprised Uwell with his sudden decision. Without explaining where he was going, Sato called her to follow him. The labyrinth was full of dangers and monsters, but at the same time it held dreams of wealth. That's why he said that they would take back the clinic on their own. Uwell supported him with determination. Sato remembered that he was able to survive in this world only thanks to meeting Alice, and how he begged her to give him the opportunity to work at the clinic. He knelt before her, knowing that he looked extremely suspicious. But Alice, instead of sending him away, asked him to stop. She noticed the wound he had suffered from the attack and offered to heal it. Sato did not yet understand the laws of this world and was amazed by the power of healing. A bright light flooded everything around, and the wound disappeared. The girl was shocked no less than he was, because this healing happened thanks to him. Later, he realized that he could not control the output of magic back then, and it was this power that became the reason he was hired as a healer. Looking back on that moment, he wondered why he had knelt down to make that request, and ironically admitted that it was partly to blame that he had accidentally seen her naked body. Uwell suggested that the way to get Alice's clinic back was hidden in the labyrinth, and asked to leave the fight to her. Sato came up with a plan that seemed promising to him. He told her about a rare crown that dropped from the boss of the 7th floor, a giant slime, and that it could be sold for a large sum, but, reminding her of his words, Uwell noted that it was too dangerous for the two of them. Then he suggested to gather a team, because even against a giant monster, you can win if you work together. Uwell admired this idea. However, he knew that hiring allies would require money, and after dividing up the proceeds from the sale of the crowns, there might be nothing left. There were only 6 days left until the auction, and he needed more than 600,000 zeni. His own income was clearly not enough, and in desperation he thought about putting all his savings in a gambling hall on the outskirts of the city. He decided to take a break and get some fresh air, and Uwell went to get some water. While he was sitting near the building, someone called out to him. In front of him stood a girl from Ruruka's squad, introducing herself as Sarah. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Sato was struck by her appearance. But then another girl intervened. It was Fran, who had sharply reprimanded him for his lustful glance at Saphira. He remembered her brash nature and wondered if Ruruka herself had come today. Samara stopped her friend and explained that it was because of her that they had come. Fran grumbled discontentedly that she had not made unnecessary requests, and Sato asked what the matter was. Sarah explained that his reputation as a healer had grown recently, and rumors were circulating that he could restore lost limbs in seconds. Sato guessed that his acquaintances had spread the word. He didn't want to be overly famous, but Sarah continued that he had helped Ruruka more than once and called it fate. Then she moved on to the main request. The girl offered him to join the destruction forces with decent pay. Having received the document with the conditions, Sato admitted that the reward was not bad, but still not enough to buy out Alice's clinic, and refused. Sapra asked him to let her know if he changed his mind, as they were in dire need of healers. Sato believed that guarding the city's outskirts should be the responsibility of knights, not adventurers, and he couldn't understand how these two were connected to the knightly order. Curiosity prompted him to ask, but Alice's clinic was still a priority. He promised to consider their offer, while also thinking of a way to get their help for free. Fran stated that Sincera was being overly concerned, as she could defeat any monster without a healer without a single scratch. She acknowledged his skill in restoring limbs, but added that most people could not afford such expensive services, and he himself must be forcing poor girls to pay with their bodies, which she found obscene. Sapira reproached her for being rude, and Sahato agreed that it was indeed said too harshly. Even for him, it was too much. But he made a mental note that he would never allow that to happen in front of Uwell. Suddenly, an idea struck him, and he grabbed Sephira's hands, exclaiming that he had found the solution. Uwell, noticing the change in his appearance, asked in surprise what had happened and inquired about his hairstyle. Sato explained that he was thinking about a way to make money quickly, and at that moment his head lit up. In reality, Fran released a powerful electric shock at him. Uwell understood the essence of what had happened, deciding that a good idea had been born at that very moment. Sato was not going to go into details and offered to find Ado, and Uwell promised to bring him a comb. When Sato met Ito, he explained that he wanted to gather a group of adventurers who had recently been attacked by giant ants. Gads asked if he was simply trying to attract more customers, but Sato noticed that his name was still being mentioned, even though he had asked for it to be kept a secret. He got into trouble for these rumors, and although he said it more as a bluff, Ito and Guys became visibly nervous. They promised to fulfill any request he made, apologized, and swore that they would not spread unnecessary information in the future. However, Ito noted that the victims were too poor to pay for treatment and asked what he was going to do. Sato just grinned. When the wounded came to him, he promised to heal them completely, but instead of money, he asked them to obey his orders for 24 hours. His plan was for 2 long-range fighters to act from the rear and several tanks to hold the front. Even newcomers fit this scheme. All that was required for the plan was a reliable human shield. A shield that can be raised again and again, no matter how many times it falls, because it can always be healed. Sato said that he was counting on their strength. One of the healed promised to give his all for the healed legs, but asked if Sato was sure that 1 day of work would be enough payment. He replied that he was a man of his word, and that would be enough. Sasatra only reminded him to remember his promise. Ruruka informed Shisheki that after defeating the giant slime, he would join their monster extermination squad, and he calmly agreed. The guy thanked both girls for coming, explaining that he was there to protect Sanera from a possible attack, and the girls listened to him with serious faces. He quickly called out to the girl, and she answered with determination that they should finish everything as quickly as possible and leave this place. Ruruka anxiously warned her master of the approaching threat, and he mentally promised to make her angry face change to embarrassment someday. At that moment, a bright flash forced everyone to take up battle positions. Ruruka struggled to hold on to the cracking shield as Shitaki cast a healing spell, urging everyone to hold on. She cast a spell, shouting, "Fireball!" and the magic hit the target with a powerful blow, and the boy, watching this, wondered if this was the enemy's core. Ruruka swung her weapon confidently, remembering how she had managed to gather adventurers who had agreed to her terms after some time. She explained that they had an agreement to help each other in the extermination, and Fran went with them as an additional force. The guy said that he was exchanging treatment for protection for 1 day. The young man confidently explained that the deal was literally a win-win, emphasizing the words, "Pay with your body." The girl enthusiastically pointed to the shining crown of slime, declaring that it belonged to them, but then a voice rang out, reminding them that according to the terms of the contract, all drops went to their owner. One of the participants happily reported that for the first time, a rare item had dropped. a crown that could be sold for 200,000 zeni. Sato Shiniki proudly announced that he had been abstaining for 7 days now, asking for a blessing and acknowledging that resisting temptations was especially difficult in the other world. They encouraged each other to continue the hunt by mentioning that the Alice Clinic auction was tomorrow and expressed their hopes for success. The next day, Semura quietly read the letter, noting that the item had sold for 1.5 million zeni. Shiki stood with his arms crossed and leaning against the wall as one girl insisted that he couldn't, and the other quietly admitted that she needed to stop dwelling on it. She asked him what brought him here, and he replied that he had heard that the auction had ended. Sato Shiseki asked if his interlocutor had decided where she would work, standing in a relaxed pose with an unperturbed expression on her face. She said she could get by on the income from her clinic for now, and then asked Alice to take a look, to which he was surprised by the sudden change of subject. Sato Shiki confidently presented the document, explaining that he had won the auction, and his interlocutor asked in amazement if this was proof of ownership of the clinic. She happily realized that she had received a rare trophy, the clinic, and along with it Alice's heart, already imagining her warm embrace and being sure that she would certainly say so. The girl happily announced that her harem with Uwell and Alice would begin today. Feeling satisfied that she had been able to repay the favor rendered, she blushed in surprise and asked him where he had suddenly gotten money from, reminding him that just a couple of days ago he had been broke. He reacted with surprise to her unexpected words, wondering why she was not happy, while she quietly apologized, standing with her head down. The girl timidly admitted that she was behaving strangely today, and he, standing behind her with his arms outstretched, froze, thinking about her confession. He wondered if she was angry with him or if she was irritated, remembering how she had to sell the clinic after all the effort she had put in, while she, needing time to sort out her feelings, had left. Uwell slept peacefully, and the narrator reflected on her efforts of the previous day and thought about finding another reward for her. Sato Shiki remembered how he got a new cloak after getting his clothes dirty during a solo trek into the labyrinth, and decided it was time to throw away the old one. Carrying his bag, he headed towards the trash can behind the inn, but while holding a small package, he noticed something unexpected. The girl, blushing, asked if her clothes were covered in blood because of what he had done for her, and he, raising his gaze from the ground, looked at her. She thought he had acted recklessly, but he explained that he always had others' backs, and judging by her reaction, she had simply misunderstood the situation. He couldn't understand why she would make such sacrifices when she decided it was easier to leave things as they were, feeling that her sympathy for him had grown. He smiled softly, saying he did it in gratitude for the kindness, as the leaves fell quietly around him. Arya, embarrassed, covered her face, and then with a gentle smile quietly called someone an idiot. Sato Shiki thought with determination that somehow this had to work out. He quietly said that he wanted to start over, turning to Alice. Dropping to one knee, he apologized sincerely for his earlier selfishness and explained that he had obtained the title deed to make amends, while she listened silently, considering his words. She paused for a moment, then admitted that she saw her father in him, admiring his healing skills and gentle nature, but added that she could not forgive sexual harassment. He hesitantly said that she was not his father, and she gently replied that he was just himself, squeezing his hand warmly. He smiled nervously and wondered whether the harassment could be justified by the fact that he was carried away by the mood of the moment, experiencing inner doubt. Eliza thanked Shiki and then, slightly embarrassed, she snuggled closer to him, and he gently placed his hand on her back. She blushed slightly and smiled softly, quietly saying, "Oh, you," expressing surprise and slight embarrassment in a small frame. Sato Shiki confidently declared that he was able to arrange everything, while the girl, closing her eyes with an anxious expression, said that there was nothing she could do to help him. He thought to himself that usually she wouldn't even let him get close, much less touch him, but today was different. While Uwell slept peacefully, the girl silently thought about her and Alice, imagining the touching scene between them and the young man. Ruruka and Shikaki spoke excitedly about the giant slime crown, jokingly suggesting that Shikaki rest behind them while they took the front lines, teasing him for his overenthusiasm. He expressed his suspicion and dissatisfaction with her, hinting that she was profiting from the sale of the slime crown, hiding behind others. He awkwardly apologized, scratching the back of his head, and she looked at him with a serious, slightly irritated look. He asked anxiously if she wanted him to stop because she no longer wanted to deal with him, and if it was due to a loss of trust. She asked if he had done it with her in mind, and then, softening, said she understood. One of them gently took the other by the hand, thanking him for the sincere efforts he had made for him. They suggested going back and she looked at him calmly. The shot showed the facade of the building with a sign, and the narrator summed up the previous chapter, noting that, with the help of money, Shikaki managed to get the girl. Says Fran, a little embarrassed, wondered if Joel would lose to someone with larger breasts, adding that even a small size has its charm. The girl confidently declared that her merits would quickly make the owner fall in love, and the little character muttered with surprise and irritation, "Damn melons?" The dark elf smiled happily, confidently stating that her rival's skills were no match for her own. She asked in surprise if they were moving to the clinic and if Alice would stay with them. He confirmed that they would now live together, and she, standing on the street near the house, looked up at him in surprise. Saria noted Uwell's affection for Alice, and the owner discussed plans to work here and cut back on receptions, thinking about telling the owner of the bar about it. Saria apologized to Uwell, but she quickly assured her that it was no problem, while a small, surprised character hovered quietly nearby. The shy, dark elf, blushing and smiling widely, admitted that she was a little taken aback, but enthusiastically promised to follow any wishes of her master. She told the shy, dark elf that from today on, she would sleep in the same room with her. Arya spoke anxiously of the uncertain future and reminded him that they couldn't share a bed with him forever, while in the background he looked worried. Sato noticed that there were many empty beds in the house, and as the two girls listened, he thought that she was right, but he wasn't going to touch her because she was still too young. The dark-haired boy was worried that sleeping together might cause problems, while the blue-haired girl reacted to his words with surprise and uncertainty. Arya smiled happily, and Sato kindly suggested that if she was lonely, she could sleep with Alice. Alice, visibly nervous, wanted to say something, but the girl cheerfully declared that the owner promised to hug her when she grew up, which caused surprise and confusion in the young man. Shas Ruruka, arms crossed and clearly irritated, demanded an explanation, and Shigaki worriedly thought that she was angry. The girl noted to herself that this was not jealousy, but simply her habit of being strict in such matters, especially with those who are still too young. The blonde girl with long hair angrily attacked the younger one, accusing her of making a mean promise to hug someone, while the younger one looked shocked and unsure. The young man anxiously begged for patience, remembering how he had tried to improve his relationship with Alice and was afraid that she would start to hate him again. Sato nervously explained that he had promised not to hurt the girl who was going through adolescence, and she listened silently, and he mentally imagined himself in a soft, caring image. The dark-haired boy quickly denied the misunderstanding, and the dark elf, confused, insisted that it was a mistake. She crossed her arms and looked at him in surprise, and he again nervously denied it, assuring her that everything was not so. He desperately tried to think of a way out of the situation and thought that he urgently needed to find a way out, while sweat was running down his face. Sato jokingly called Alice beautiful, but she angrily replied that he could not be fooled by that, and he gently tried to calm her down, hinting at the complex reason for what was happening. She reluctantly agreed to let him get away with it, admitting that the girl had strong feelings for him, and he quietly sighed with relief. Arya gently told Uwell that it was not good to sleep in the same bed with a man, and suggested that if she felt lonely, she could share the bed with her. He insisted that Uwell had never been selfish, and she hesitated as the narration explained that Alice considered her desire to sleep with her master to be selfish. He understood why she was so embarrassed, and she, blushing and unable to speak, stood with tears shining in her eyes. Feeling guilty for her sadness, he apologized and hugged her, promising to be there for her always, and she happily agreed, calling him her master. Sato insisted that he should speak first, but Eliza asked him to wait, and Arya reluctantly agreed since Uwell-chan insisted on it. Sato and the girl lay silently on adjacent beds, until she, blushing, quietly said that she would do the same. Sato Shigeki reflected that this was their first night in the same room, and recalled how Eliza, having succumbed to the moment, had now regained her calm, although she was in no hurry to open up. The girl, closing her eyes, silently thought about how their relationship had taken a small step forward. She offered freshly baked cookies, and the two of them happily thanked her, while he thought about how to avoid trouble when returning from the toilet at night. The dark-haired guy noted that there were no patients coming, while the dark elf ate with pleasure and said that the food was delicious, and a small figure next to her was interested in her opinion. While Eliza wrote a letter to former regulars, he thanked them for the food and thought about how to attract new patients from the city to avoid bankruptcy. He told Eliza that they would go shopping in the city, and at the same time he would advertise the clinic among his adventurer friends, and she thanked him, asking him to do so. He informed Uwell that he had asked the bar owner to warn Ruruka and the others about the move, thinking that Eliza's clinic might be more convenient since it was further away from the labyrinth. Fran cheerfully agreed to spend her salary without restrictions and mentioned a store she wanted to visit. Arya sheepishly admitted that she wanted to wear adult lingerie, and someone off-camera quickly reminded her that it was meant for adults. Satoshiki offered a cute outfit, promising to pay for it if it was underwear. But he felt awkward about having already attracted the attention of others. Arya wondered if she looked good in this outfit and doubted its style, and he thought that if nothing was changed, it would get worse, and suggested another option. He angrily denied the accusation, claiming that he was merely her guardian, while the two whispered nearby. One of the guys asked Uwell why she chose revealing underwear, and she explained that it was Geyser-san's advice, and the other one immediately warned her not to listen to him anymore. He said they had already gotten everything they needed, but she asked if they could go to one more store, and he just hoped it wasn't a lingerie store, heading meanwhile to the equipment store in search of unusual items. Uwell explained that the magic item had protective powers, and he was hesitant about spending his entire salary, but she suggested that they consider it a talisman and thanked him for it. The girl explained with a smile that she wanted to give the owner a gift, and he reacted with a little embarrassment and surprise. He asked if there was one in a different color, and the dark-skinned elf looked at him with a questioning expression. He quietly held the small wrapped gift in his hands, thinking he had bought another one because he felt awkward being the only one who had received something. The character thought about the magical protective bracelet that could stop a single fatal attack from a monster, hoping that the moment of its breakdown would never come, because Uwell would be upset if it did. She asked if it was an emergency patient, and he said he would go check. The girl urgently called out to Shiki for help, mentioning Ruruka, while nearby Fran and Samira looked exhausted and worried. It had been a while since Luluka's last visit to Eliza's clinic, and he must have felt awkward after that incident. But there would be no discounts this time. Shruka fervently begged for the full price, including the additional fee, and asked to save them without asking for a reduction in price. Arya explained that although it may not seem like it, she cares about her friends and will not ask for extra payment, asking them to tell her what happened to them. Ruruka explained that they had been exterminating kobolds outside the city and were planning to return before dark, hoping to find out what had happened. Satoshiki smiled and gave a thumbs up, asking for the story to continue while the four girls, Ruruka, Fran, Arya, and Eliza, rested together, tired and sweaty. The boy smiled confidently, surrounded by four girls, two of whom encouraged him to continue while he gave a thumbs-up gesture. Shiki apologized and asked them to turn away, and the girl insisted that they were doing it because they seemed to be having a hard time, but he replied that he had to find the right moment. Ruka called out to Shiki in alarm, and he responded calmly, while the narration noted that Eliza was also suffocating from the pressure and her chest was about to burst out. They were discussing a huge turtle monster called the Krankheit turtle that could release a poisonous mist, and someone remembered hearing the name before. Sarah explained that the increase in the number of kobolds was caused by the monster approaching the city, mentioning that she had previously sent a request to exterminate it. Satoshiki calmly suggested doing this together with Disposan, and his interlocutor briefly agreed. Fran had made rude remarks towards him from the first time they met, but he saw this as a chance to make her be indebted to him. He happily hugged Fran and Samira, glad that they were okay, while Fran looked surprised, and Samira smiled softly. Druka sincerely thanked the two, one of whom remained silent, with a serious expression on his face. Sato listened silently as the girl thanked the other for her concern, and thought that she owed him something, even though she wouldn't admit it openly. The girl thanked her companion, remembering how she used healing magic, and removed the poison in the fight with the huge slug, just as Samira said. Fran happily praised Sisera, who sheepishly protested, while Shigaki thought that Sisera would do better to stop allowing herself to be spoiled like that. He calmly asked for her help with healing magic, and offered to join the extermination squad to defeat Krankheit Turtle together. He smiled confidently, and she, blushing slightly, enthusiastically informed Eliza that they were leaving. Eliza calmly wished to be more careful on the streets, because the day had come when they would have to accompany the extermination squad. He told Shiki to take care of herself, and she warned him not to do anything indecent, to which he asked to be spared the trouble of bailing someone out of custody. He noted with slight nervousness that this most likely would not happen, and then added that Uwell would be with him, causing his interlocutor to look at him in surprise. The boy called out to Uwell, who readily volunteered to protect her master, while the calm girl noted the importance of preventing further damage to the city. Arya smiled softly, noting that his healing magic shouldn't be limited to the walls of a small clinic. The girl shuddered, noticing her flat chest, and the guy confidently wished her to return home safe, while the elf exclaimed in amazement that her chest simply would not fit into such a tight shirt. Sase Ruka called out to Shiki, who was standing next to Eliza, and was surprised to learn that Luluka had also joined the party. She shyly admitted that she had been looking forward to meeting him, and he wondered if she was being serious or joking, before noticing the protective bracelet she was wearing, which she said she and Uwell had bought together. Eliza handed Sato Shishaki a pair of magical earrings with slight embarrassment, explaining their effect, and he looked surprised and unsure whether to accept the gift. Sase Ruka confidently stated that they were now a couple and asked for confirmation, and the guy quickly denied that he was trying to deceive her. She timidly admitted that this was his first fight outside the city, and he offered to give her an amulet. Sato Shiki wondered why Fran was recruiting people for the extermination squad, and expressed doubt, since this was usually the job of the knights. They explained to him what he didn't know yet. Fran is the daughter of the city lord. He noticed that everyone had already gathered, and with a cheerful expression he greeted them with the words that the detachment was in full force. The two girls confidently declared their mission to destroy Crankite Turtle, as they stood before a line of armored soldiers ready for battle. Sato Shikaki remarked on the beauty of the scenery, while two armored warriors warned of possible rain coming soon. She gazed wide-eyed at the majestic city of Melhearts, and he watched her from behind, equally enchanted by the view. Srugruka praised the sharpness of her gaze, and offered to tell her the history of the city, to which Arya responded with surprise, confirming that she understood everything correctly. The boy enthusiastically expressed his desire to hear the story, and the girl explained that this could be considered a kind of disinheritance, which made him wonder why the Lord's daughter became an adventurer. He said that her parents then arranged a match for her, but Fran opposed the marriage and even threw a fireball into the groom's groin. Fran explained that she had become an adventurer and occasionally joined the knights, wanting to gain recognition as a future head of the family, and her worried parents had sent Sira to accompany her. They discussed how Fran wanted to make adventurers and knights witnesses to her exploits, and Samara came to Shishiki because she wanted Fran to have more protectors in case she was injured. One of the girls remarked that she had heard about the two's friendship since childhood, as they stood side by side in the soft glow of the background. Sato informed Arya that they had spotted a Crankite turtle by the river, and the monster was shown resting on the shore. Realizing that they had been discovered, Sato quickly ordered everyone to proceed according to plan, briefly thinking that in bikini armor they might not be noticed. Ruka encouraged Shiaki with an energetic smile, stating that they were counting on him. The front line, led by Luluka and the decoy knights, found themselves surrounded by a toxic fog, as healers prepared to tend to the injured and mages and archers fired from the rear. The enemy was trapped and unable to act, and the fog, less dangerous than in the case of Fran and Sarah, made it possible to prevent him from escaping. Sato asked Fran if she was ready for a long spell, and she calmly replied that the fight would probably be over before he could launch his favorite fireball. He suggested finishing off the monster so it wouldn't harm the city, and she admitted with concern that she didn't like seeing such a one-sided fight. The girl anxiously asked why the enemy did not retreat and continued to take blows, turning to her master for an explanation. She ordered everyone to retreat, declaring that she would deal the final blow, while the other girl persistently called for a retreat. One asked if they had seen her strength. Another asked if they had managed to finish off the enemy, and the dark elf sharply exclaimed that they had not yet. Sato Shiki wondered anxiously if the monster was truly dead, as he watched its massive body fall to the ground with a thud. Fran thanked Shiki and Uwell for saving her, while the other girl responded with slight irritation. Meanwhile, the boy was loudly complaining, demanding to be let go, when someone grabbed him. She angrily stated that she had not asked for help, and he noted that one wrong move could have resulted in injury, and asked why she was still acting like that. Ruruka asked if everything was okay, and Arya explained that she tried to save them since they were right in front of her, to which he commented on how light she felt due to the lack of weight on her chest. They found eggs in the monster's nest, and someone explained that the monster was guarding them. He realized that the monster was unwilling to leave the nest, because Fran's magic had burned its eggs, and that was most likely what made it attack her. The squad discussed the unexpected situation and decided to split into two groups to quickly return to the main road, while one of the participants clarified what exactly had happened. He remembered falling due to the collapse, and then seeing Uwell jump after him with determination. He apologized for taking her clothes off without permission, explaining that he had started a fire with a magical tool to dry her clothes faster and prevent her from catching a cold. The boy assumed that the scattered coins were dropped trophies, and asked if she had protected him from monsters while he was unconscious. noting that she should not have any magical artifacts. She remembered hearing about the large number of kobolds in the forest and wondered if Uwell had been saving her from all these creatures, despite the fact that she herself was only getting in the way. Sato Shiki examined the gun, trying to figure out what it was, and the surprised girl asked if he knew what a firearm was, after which he offered to take it with them since they had it. Shiruka admitted with surprise that she also knew how to use a gun, and the narration noted that, judging by her reaction, firearms most likely do not exist in this world. The girl praised him for his skillful handling of such a complex object, and he admitted that he had never held a gun in his hands before but still managed to cope. They presented a magical item, a jar of slime jelly, usually used in cooking to remove the smell of meat and improve the taste, but also capable of putting out fire. Sato examined the thing, noticing its resemblance to a fire extinguisher, and the dark elf, surprised, suggested trying it out right now. The girl asked about the liquid, and the guy explained that it was a slime jelly that could capture a target and extinguish a flame. The hero noted with relief that the object was definitely not an adult toy. Looking at the small pile of sticks, he raised the bottle confidently, declaring that one had to be on his level to understand its purpose, and she enthusiastically praised him. Sato Shishaki and Eliza stood by the river at sunset, discussing their next steps, recalling the nights, warning about the unforeseen situation, and deciding to regroup as soon as possible. Sato noticed that Uwell looked unwell and wondered if she was tired, remembering how she had protected him after he fell, and she had quietly confirmed her fears. Uwell looked exhausted, and someone offered to carry her, but she refused, not wanting to be a burden to her master. The dark elf assured them that she could see perfectly well in the dark, and urged them to move faster before nightfall. He exclaimed in surprise upon learning about the ability of night vision, and praised Uwell for her high skill. Sato Shikeki wondered how far they had gotten after being carried away by the current, assessing the map and the likelihood of encountering a squad of fighters as they moved along the river through the forest. He thought that Uwell was being overly cautious, watching as she looked around anxiously, clutching some object in her hand. He was worried that she wouldn't be able to keep up this pace for long, because he had never seen her like this before. Even in the labyrinth, he assured her that he could always heal them, unless they were immediately dealt a fatal blow, reminding her about the protective bracelets and asking her to relax at least a little. A downpour fell on the trees, and one of the companions calmly noted that the leaves were falling because of the rain, and the other quietly agreed. She continued to silently observe the situation, and the narrative noted that it was unlikely that she would be able to relax. He advised Uwell to be careful when walking through the forest at night, admitting that this was the first time he had encountered such a thing. Sato Shineki was wary, thinking he had stepped on a mine, but then convinced himself it was nothing and told her to forget it, thinking about her past as a former slave, which she probably didn't want to remember. He said that the shelter was located in the small town of Kershay and was closed when he was sold into slavery, and he himself then earned money by hunting monsters in the forest. He quietly said that he understood, remembering how Uwell was sent into slavery and ended up in Melhood. She admitted with a warm smile that she was happy to be next to her master, although she hesitated before saying it. Sato Shiki called out to Uwell sharply, realizing that she was exhausted, and hugged her tightly, protecting her. He remembered that she had been badly injured when they first met, and since slave traders would not damage the merchandise, he concluded that she had received these injuries before the sale. The narrative mentioned a path through the forest to Melhood, and suggested that she was then attacked by some kind of monster. She apologized, admitting that she had been keeping a secret from her master, and said that when she tried to pronounce his name, she felt it calling her. The girl explained with concern that the creature was neither a kobold nor a crankite turtle, hinting that something else lived in the forest. Deep in the forest, in the pouring rain, stood a huge creature, and next to it sat a boy. The narration clarified that it was neither a kobold nor a turtle. Crankite. Sato Shichaki realized that his attack was not doing any harm to the monster and decided not to engage in direct combat, dodging the powerful counterattack. Explosions were heard and he called on Uwell to flee, but she begged him to let her go, promising to detain the enemy, and he called out to her in a panic. The guy asked if this creature was the cause of her old wound. He held her tightly against him in the rain, feeling her tremble and noticing that her bracelet was already broken, fearing that another blow might kill her. She cried in the pouring rain, fearing that she would not get out alive, but insisted that at this rate, the monster would soon catch up with them. A huge, dark silhouette approached through the fog and rain, and with every step, its heavy blows on the ground sounded louder and louder. He decided that someone had to stop him, even if Uwell hated him for it, and she reluctantly agreed, admitting that there was no other way. In the rain, he ordered Uwell to leave him and run to the city, and she, full of anxiety, met his gaze, and he mentally asked her for forgiveness. The dark elf was surprised to learn that the slave mark could force one to carry out an order against one's will. Sato Shiseki decided to use his power, promising to delay the enemy and ordering the others to get to the city. He clenched his fist with unwavering determination, determined to show his readiness to act like a true master.